Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Show Up with Christine Chang podcast. Today we have Dr. Neeta Bhushan. She is host of the Brave Table podcast. And also, we are here to talk about her fourth book titled That Sucked, Now What? How to Embrace the Joy and Chaos and Find Magic in the Mess. Thanks for being here. Again, I haven't seen you in forever. We've seen each other. She lives in Austin, I'm in LA, but I've seen
Many
her
states apart.
more than most of my friends here in LA this last month.
By the way, I love that we see each other a lot. Can I just tell you that?
No, it's great. I like
really
hanging out with you
it.
because
Yes.
you're just good at doing things. And I'm very intentional of who I spend time with. And if I'm trying to grow and do things, you're the perfect person to set the tone for that. If I could just be 10% of how productive you are, oh my God, I'd be so much more successful.
Stop. Oh my gosh. See, it's so interesting how we have friends who I think we mirror each other. Because I can say the same thing about you. I'm like, oh my gosh, I really love the way that she's put out this show. And it's been so, like, I know that there's a lot that goes, with the bells and whistles of a show. I mean, of course, I have my own. But for you to have the tenacity and the consistency, so I see that in you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for acknowledging me. I wasn't used to that with my Asian upbringing. Let's talk about that because we all know growing up Asian kind of sucks until you get older and you heal and do all the work and the things and you're realizing what a blessing it is, actually.
It's true.
I'm so glad I had the parents that I had, even though I
Were you, though?
grew up. Now I'm happy.
Okay, yeah.
During, no.
Yeah.
I had to work through some things. And in your book, well, first, what inspired you to write this book? It's basically about how to live life with more grace because sucky moments are going to happen. And what I love about your book is it's not just encouragement. Because you're a doer and you're very productive, there's step by step. So like how to move through it in a healthy way and also faster, which I like.
Faster, easier, all of the tools.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was your life defining big sucky moment that kind of kicked off like, oh, you know what? This would be a good skill to have if I can learn to get through this better.
Yeah, I think that having grown up with also very Asian tiger parents, I didn't have any coping skills. I didn't have any, a lot of the things that I talk about in the book, which we'll get into. But, during the time of even me growing up, I didn't know what emotional regulation was. You mirror what your immigrant parents are doing. And my parents, my mom was from the Philippines, my dad was from India. And so it was very this like strict, lots of yelling, very passionate, no talking back to your elders, and just you either get the chinela, like the chancla, but in Ilocano and Tagalog they say chinela.
Oh, okay.
Which, similar to Spanish. And then also in Hindi, it's like the 4-finger thupper, which is like smack.
We all have ours. Because the Chinese.
What did your mom do?
In Chinese, it's the Chinese feather duster. Have you seen that one? It's like a bamboo stick.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry, Filipinos are also Chinese too, right?
Okay.
So they would take the broom.
Okay.
It's like, what did you call it? The feather duster?
Chinese feather duster.
Did we?
It's like a long bamboo stick, and then it's got the brown and black feathers.
It's the same. I feel like it's the same that we use in the Philippines.
Okay.
But yeah, she would just like, it's either the chinela or that. You had all of those things. So, you grow up kind of dysfunctional in many ways.
It's verbally and emotionally abusive, and physically if not physically
abusive. I mean, we don't think of it in that way. When we grow up, we can make fun of it. Like we're sitting here making fun of it, but it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And actually, what's really interesting, I am not big on YouTube at all. But there is it just a side conversation and a side note. What's interesting is in like a very long time ago when I was first starting out, 2016, there's a video that I created it's something like how to manage your Asian parents, how to stand up to your Asian parents. It's something, I don't know, something along those lines. It is so old. But tell me why that is the single video that gets the most traction on my channel. I've done way more. But for whatever reason, I've tried to recreate those videos. I've tried to do, like have better like tools. But nope, that one in 2016, I have no idea why. But it tells you that this is a collective healing that we're all going through. And I would have to say that, you know, I didn't necessarily come through my biggest, darkest moment that would jumpstart this full healing journey. And that was my marriage. It was my first marriage. I thought I married, you know, Prince Charming. And I fell in love. And it was after dental school because I thought I really made it. And
this is in your 20s, right?
This was in my 20s.
When you think you know everything.
Oh, I knew everything. And I shunned away all of the friends that were telling me, like, this dude is not cool. Like, he's such a douche, you know? And he's not. Like, why? So, you know, I can make fun of it, but obviously back then it was dark. It was lonely. There was a lot of fear, a lot of red flags. I mean, and yeah, things had to get really dark for me to actually haphazardly leave that relationship. It was a very toxic and abusive relationship. Now, when I was in it, obviously didn't realize until I had to really hit rock bottom, and I had to really question. And it was two people that questioned me, you know, that really paid and played a really pivotal role, my brother and a friend of mine. But these were questions that, you know, I think you and I are mirrors. And so they were mirrors for me at that time. Mirrors of, hey, do you actually really want to live this way? They're like, you're not even 30. You have this beautiful, amazing dental practice. But honestly, like, look at where you're at. And just to have a reflection like that, I wasn't ready to hear it many times, but for whatever reason, that particular time, it kind of stuck with me, because that's when I realized, I'm like, oh shit, I'm in this, and it's actually not safe. It's actually dangerous, and it's toxic, and it just pulled up all of these wounds and emotions from my childhood that I really didn't reconcile. I didn't deal with. And then when I actually, you know, stepped out of that relationship and then really dove into the deepest, darkest depths of healing and wailing and, you know, screaming and moaning and fully allowing myself to finally feel some of the feelings that I was ashamed of, actually. Because growing up, you know, we're taught, and I don't know if this was in your household, but I know for me, having this Punjabi father, I was not allowed to say when I was sad. And we had a lot of loss growing up. Like, my mom got sick. She was sick for 6 years. She had cancer. Then we lost my brother a year later, you know, and then 2 years after that, my dad got sick. So it was a lot. It was a very tumultuous, really tough time. And during that time, I think that, you know, I was told, like, big girls don't cry. Tough girls like you, Neeta, don't cry. And so I thought, okay, I got to button it up. I have to, like, you know, be this emotionally perfect person. And only recently, since I was doing research on this book, did I actually realize what emotional perfection was. And for those of you who are coming into this not knowing what emotional perfection was, but it's this idea that we have to be emotionally perfect, that there are only these good emotions to display, like happiness and
like positivity.
And, you know, and that's who I was growing up, because I thought, hey, the world cannot see me break down. The world cannot see me sad. because I'd been through much, I cannot show everyone like that I had been through so much. So I locked all those dark feelings away until it came kind of bursting at the seams during my divorce, where finally it's like, whoa, flood works, water works, and just allowing myself to be seen in the ways that for the longest time, I didn't even know what that looked like, but I couldn't even help myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of people can, I think, resonate with that, because it's when you're going through it, oh my God, it's so scary. Or if you're thinking about it, like taking that step.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to hear from people who have gone through it. And you have an amazing life. You're married. You have two adorable kids, successful career. You're a happy woman. And also you've done the work. You're healed. Actually, one of my favorite things about you is that you're not a reactive person, and you are emotionally regulated because you've done the work. There's also the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe like bypassing or pretending things don't bother you. That's not healthy either. I've done that a lot. And that's what is great about your book. It's because you have to acknowledge the emotions that you have in order to heal and move on for them. It's not the toxic positivity, that doesn't work. That ends up biting you in the ass. But for you, actually, anyone really close to my life, that's actually one of my core values. And I get everyone is where they are in their journey, and it's absolutely fine. But I think because it's important to me, and I spent a lot of time doing the work as well for self-regulation, emotional regulation.
Yeah.
And life is it flows so much smoother when you have that. So can we talk about that? And how can someone learn to do that? They're just like, okay, I know I need to heal. I want to move forward. How do I do that?
Oh gosh, yes. So, there's, and I want to say something about the emotional regulation and our parents and our Asian parents, because, I think for, our listeners and your listeners and whoever's watching this, I think it's safe to say that, our Asian parents, they did the best they could because of their generational trauma and their upbringing from their Asian parents and then the lineage before them. And, when I was doing research on this book, because of course I'm a nerd, I'm a health geek, I'm all of those things. And I came across a lot of this, I'm going to get scientific for a second, but a lot of this literature on generational trauma. And I was like, okay, fine. I hear this buzzword all the time, generational trauma, how much of it really impacts us. And then I was looking into, have you ever done a family constellation?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was really mind blowing. And, I kind of geek out with all of those things. So I'm like, sure. And there was this book that I came across, I forget the name. Anyways, and so I signed up with one of their practitioners, and they did a whole lineage deep dive and basically it's I don't know, however many questions, tons. And I had this done probably early on when I first got divorced, but it didn't, how sometimes you do things and then it doesn't click until the time it actually clicks. So when I did it in my late 20s, or it was early 30s, it didn't really resonate for me until I actually did it again, when I was writing this book. And what it is they literally go into, well, what was the relationship with your parents? What were some of the traumas going on when you were born? What were where was your family living? What was their financial situation? What were any of the secrets that were going on in their life, in their siblings' lives, in their any caretakers close to them? And you're talking about your parents. And then they go a step further. They're like, can you tell us a time about your grandparents? What era and where in the world were they growing up in? And so then you have this whole perspective of, well, first of all, it's not just about you.
That is the great thing to realize, because with our parents, typically, even when you're interacting with it, it's always about you. How often do we ask them questions about them? And you talk about that in the book, that if your parents are alive or a parental figure, can you sit down and have a conversation with them, asking them some questions about their childhood?
Yes. Yes. And so I literally got so geeked out over this because I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, this is actually what we need to be going into in terms of how do people, kind of get into whatever they're healing from, whether it's a breakup, whether it's a loss, whether it's, a gig they didn't get or a promotion they were looking for, or the thing that they were looking so forward to, but it never happened. Where is it that it's deeply embedded in either how we show up, the patterning from when we were younger that is now still kind of, subconsciously seeping into either the relationships, the friendships that we have, the boss that we attract, all of these things, and how to make peace with it. And so I think for me, having made peace, so the first part is really making peace with your upbringing, because we know that we can't really control what happened. We can't blame our parents for everything, even though, of course, we'd probably want to. Mm-hmm. And, there's this whole, I think, stance right now where it's like, let's blame the parents on everything. I mean, let's have empathy for where they were coming from and the era of the world they were coming from. And especially if they were immigrants coming here, that's a lot to, and being that, like, what are we called? The model minority,
mm-hmm.
In many ways. And so to be that good, the good minority and to prove and show up, that's a lot of pressure, mm-hmm. right? And so I think that the pressure to be for our diaspora, and I'm saying, for every all like Asian collective, because I know that there's a lot of that. And also, I think, so making peace with that. But then the second part of that is, are you exposing yourself to good stress? Are you actually exposing yourself to tiny little new things that can get you out of your comfort zone, that can really get you out of your ability to sit in the suck? Because I think for a lot of us, when we're going through tough moments, it's so easy to think, shit, I think this is just my reality. Like, I keep attracting these terrible men. Like, I keep attracting, like, what the heck? Like, is this just a bad season for me? Instead of saying, okay, and take personal responsibility for where you're at, and really kind of identify and say, all right, well, what could I do differently? If I want somebody to be honest or vulnerable, can I be that? Am I really showing up? How you talk about, how am I really showing up, and what parts of me am I still so afraid of allowing other people to see? And how do we lean into that? And then the third and the fourth parts of this, and what I call in the book is called building your bounce factor. But the third part of that is, well, our capacity to feel. And I think for a lot of us Asians, we don't know how to do that. And there is a particular chapter in the book, I think it's the first chapter, or at least it's in part 1, where I literally go over, there's 8 steps on, all right, what do you do when you're feeling a tough emotion? All right, so first, I literally break it down. And for anybody who's never emotionally regulated, or you get snappy if somebody's irritating you, or, you've just not had the tools, and yes, everybody says breathe, but there's a physical connection to, and a mind-body connection when we put our hand over our heart, honestly, and we go inward for a second. And when we're feeling the discomfort of what that feeling is, we're actually giving ourselves an embrace, and we're connecting our mind to our body, saying, okay, whatever this is, it sucks right now. I don't really want to feel it, but I'm actually going to feel it. I'm going to feel that jealousy right now. I'm going to feel that discomfort of having to speak my mind and share this boundary that I don't really want to share, but I'm going to feel it. I'm going to notice where I'm actually feeling it. So when we're paying attention and when we actually have a physical representation of connecting back to our body, we kind of can say, oh, all right, we can stop for a moment. We can stop and we can notice, where are we breathing? Are we breathing heavy? Are we starting to spiral? And we're giving ourselves that permission. And so that's just one of the ways of really tuning in. And then the final part of the bounce factor is your full awareness, your radical self-awareness, to even knowing, like, do these people that I'm constantly hanging out with, are they good for me right now? Or are they going to contribute to me sitting in my suck and sitting in my misery? Like, there's
some people love it. They want to stay in it. And they want you to stay in it too.
And it's like you're both fueling the fire, right? And I feel like that's what, girlfriend pity parties are. Like, we'll get a bunch of our girlfriends together and we'll talk about how terrible that one person is. And this is back in the day, right? Like, and in my book, I call it, like the pity party of one, where, yeah, it's okay for a little bit of time. Or when you're actually, doing retail shopping to just numb the pain and to escape the pain, and to distract the pain. But you know that inevitably, what are you actually really feeling? Okay, if we go into that for a second, well, there's a story in the book how one of my clients gets ghosted after she, has this terrible breakup. And she then goes on a retail shopping binge. And this is a true story, by the way. Then she, calls me and she's just like, she goes into her pity party of one. And of course, back in the day when I would do one-on-one coaching, she's, then she'd say, like, I don't know, I'm never going to find love again. I'm just like done with it. But then, figuring out later that, oh, wait, it was just my fear and my coping mechanism. Like, we all have our coping mechanisms, but most of us are so afraid to see what those coping mechanisms are, because then they'll reveal that, oh, wow, we've been avoiding for a really long time because it's scary to look under the hood. And it kind of reminds us, like, what or how did we react to when our parents disapproved of our behavior? And and it also kind of shares a point of what emotions were okay in their presence and what weren't. Because I remember vividly, I was getting bullied one time when I was, I think in the 7th grade or something like that. I'm pretty sure it was the 7th grade. And I went home and I told my dad. And, my mom wasn't sick at this point, but I told them both. And basically and I was like so upset because I was so afraid to go to school the next day. And they're like, go study. That was it. It was like, go study. It's going to be okay. Just go study. Make sure you get an A on that math test. And I'm like, I am so scared right now. We grew up in the city of Chicago. And it was just, in my mind, I'm like, wow, okay, the only time my parents would accept my feelings is if, the meaning that I made in my mind at that point was, I got to perform. I got to bring home that trophy for piano. I got to bring home that trophy for the dance competition or the, Filipino dance competition, whatever that was, to just get their care and approval. And so I think then now, fast forward, your radical self-awareness is knowing what really, is aligned for you and knowing when things are just not. And to be able to say, okay, actually, I'm going to stay in tonight and I'm not going to, we're good. I'm good. I don't need to do X, Y, or Z because I don't need that right now.
I love all that you're saying, just because I think self-awareness, it's one of my core values as well. It's just so helpful to have. It's step one. And That's step one. And even if you are doing a coping mechanism that it maybe is avoidant or isn't the healthiest, I've had to learn to also not beat myself up over that. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, I might be laughing to deflect, but you know what? Can I just enjoy my life for a second? Just laugh right now. You know, like it's okay. And I've been through, actually, when the pandemic started, you were talking about how your parents just said, go do your homework. That is actually my coping mechanism. When the pandemic started, what did I do? I wrote a book and I published it. That's what I'm doing. I'm like, what do I do with my time? And I understood what I was very aware of what I was doing, but I'm also happy that my book came out, you know, and it's always balance. And during that time as well, I think, you know, because I shared with you later on that I was, you know, basically like functionally depressed for a couple years. Yeah. I'm doing things, but I don't feel good about it. And I really beat myself up over it. And in your book, well, we're going to segue into this, which you categorize where you are in the process. So the first one is falling. So I'm basically falling for years. And I was like beating myself up with like, that's a really long time that you're not being as productive as you can, trusting that I'm on the timeline I'm supposed to be on. You know, and it's funny how you always like, you're so hard on yourself because everyone else is just like, you are productive, you're doing things. But I'm like, to me, I know me, I'm like, but I don't want to get up in the morning. That's not okay. And sometimes that's, you know, for me, it's my body telling me, you do need to be quiet for a sec. What do you actually want here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. I'm so glad that you're bringing that up. And I think that I feel like for most people, when they have a fall, and this is huge, even for you, and I think for a lot of high achievers, especially when we've grown up with the idea that if we're not working, if we're not contributing, if we're not doing, therefore I am
worthless.
Right? Not worthy of love, not worthy
useless.
of...
That's what I heard grow up. Don't be useless.
Oh, gosh. I heard lazy. Lazy was a thing. And it still is a thing for me. And I feel in that's definitely a trigger point. But how many of us with our upbringing heard that, like, be useful or don't be lazy, right? And I even find myself now in motherhood, not to segue from what we're talking about, but like goes into my mind of like, oh, if I'm not cleaning this up right now, what would my mom say? And I'm like, whoa, okay, I have to reparent myself there. Or I have to like reframe what I'm thinking, because if I'm then going to have this frenetic and anxious energy around my kids, they're going to then pick up that anxious energy, you know, and like, that's not good either, right? Or that's not what I want to teach them, what's good and bad, right? And I think that for our big emotions, especially when we're going through a sucky time where you were, you know, going through this depression, and I think what comes up is the judgment of it. The judgment of like, why am I feeling this way? And I should be doing, so then it kind of takes you down even more because you're like, energetically, I can't really give. But then you're trying to, but then it's coming from a lack place where you're doing just to do, but you're kind of not really in it. And I can also, you know, resonate because after the birth of Ari, my first child, I definitely went into postpartum depression, and I never understood that I had feelings like that mimicked some of the feelings that I felt during my adolescence. But I tried to mask them so much because that pain was so overwhelming in my adolescent years, that when it came back and there was nowhere else to put it. It had to be dealt with. And I don't know for you if that was like, if you ever surrendered to that time, but I know that even for myself, I was like, whoa. And the judgment of like, wow, I'm really being bitchy right now and irritated and irritable and sad and waterworks and just crying and like full on like breakdowns, you know, and I didn't realize that I was fully in that until I was out of it. And that was 6 months later to then say, oh, wow, that was a really dark time, which is why I love the contrast. And I talk about the, you know, paradoxical emotions that we can we can feel, especially after a fall, especially when we are, you know, the second part of this stage is when we're in an ignition where we have to make a choice. Are we going to stay in that spot of feeling like and really sitting and simmering in the suck? Or are we going to try to crawl out of it? And when, you know, the universe, God, whatever you believe, when somebody shows you an opportunity or kind of says, hey, are you going to, you know, are you going to come to that yoga class next week? Are you going to come to the dance class? Are you going to take that job? Are you going to go on that date? You know, there's an invitation, an opportunity. There's that ignition, the ignite. Am I going to say yes to this new reality? Am I going to, and I remember, you know, when I was in my deepest, darkest days of my divorce, somebody asked me, hey, are you want to do this like improv with me? And I'm like, wait, what is that? Yeah, well, it's where you kind of, you know, you're present, you play a lot of games. I thought it was kind of like stand-up comedy. And so I'm like, no way, I'd never do that. Oh my goodness, absolutely not. But then one of my friends was like, no, I think it'd be really good for you, actually. Why don't we try it? To give yourself a new reality, right? So that was a spark. Am I going to take that or am I not? And then we get into stage 3 where you're rising and I'm in this improv class. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a new way of relating to people. Yes, and this is brilliant. And then I tried stand-up comedy. You know, like I took a class and I was like, oh my goodness, this is where I can start to alchemize and transform some of my pain because what I've been through was so heavy. And now to experience the other side of that, the joy, like the full contrast. I think many times we think it's an all or, you know, this is an all or nothing game. Like you have to be happy all the time. And what I love about comedy even, and we were just talking about this in the car when we were driving over here, you know, if you take comedians and any stand-up comedian, and by the way, not a comedian, I love comedy. Let me just, maybe at some point I'll get more into it. But what I love about it so much is in a span of maybe a 5-minute set or 10 minutes, you'll see somebody waver all of the emotions, bring somebody in, and they're embracing all of themselves. Yes, they're getting a laugh, but they're also taking you to the depths of whatever they were feeling to then take you to the opposite, to actually feel the opposite. And what I talk about when we're in the rising stage, you are wobbly. You don't know, you're unsure of, I mean, there are days where I want to get out of bed, and then there are days where I like still want to stay in bed. There are days where I'm excited about this new opportunity that I can find love again. But when I meet that person, I'm still reserved. I'm still guarding my heart. And I want to invite everyone to welcome those aspects of ourselves, because I think that for me, the unlearning of my upbringing and the patterning was, don't judge yourself for feeling the rage and the anger. And for the longest time, I was not okay with somebody else's anger. And I think the reason why is because I was never okay with my anger. So how could I even hold somebody else's anger? And I think for some, you know, we see this in relationships too. Some people are okay with actually showing their sadness, their grief, their disappointment. And some partners, maybe our male counterparts, are okay with showing their anger, frustration, rage. And I think for a lot of us, especially the people-pleasing part of my Asian self, where I was taught from my pageant queen family lineage on my mother's side that, oh, women we don't show that side of us. What are you talking about? That's not appropriate. That's not the emotional perfectionism until we actually can sit with and say, oh, wow, I'm not okay with that person's anger because I was never given the permission to feel that rage that I felt with the doctors coming in telling both of my parents they had cancer, that teenage rebellion. And so I invite everyone, like in that rising stage where there is that paradox of emotions, but to embrace it, to welcome it, to feel it. And I think the issue that we've gotten wrong here about emotions is that, we're not supposed to express and get angry. But it's not the expression that's bad. It's what are you going to do with that anger?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that's a good distinction too. I was going to ask that actually, because with anger, yes, I think it's okay. Where my personal boundary is pushing that onto other people. If someone does that to me, I'm not okay with that. And of course, that's my job to communicate that. But if someone's not aware of that or they don't care, because some people are just like, I get to feel my anger, like this, like entitled. But I'm like, well, you're also impacting everyone around you. So what is a healthy way to that question? What do you do with anger?
Well, I think that, this is why it's so beautiful to spend time with young people because, and when I'm saying young people, like toddlers, because they'll
not Gen Z,
not Gen Z, Gen Z, no. With toddlers, okay, at 2 years old, they're, from a science perspective, they don't have, even up until 26, we don't have that prefrontal cortex developed at all to even emotionally regulate. So when you see a 2-year-old acting out, by the way, everybody have patience for a kid that's acting out in the grocery store, in the parking lot, in a department store, if you ever go to those things anymore, and on an airplane or in an airport. Those children, they are our teachers. And if you were ever to judge a 2-year-old crying, and I used to be one of those when I didn't have kids, crying, acting out, wailing, screaming, they're not told that it's not okay. They're just expressing. And they're feeling and moving through their emotions, and they're moving through them and allowing themselves to feel. They're not hurting anybody, right? I mean, I think it's safe to say that if they were going to hurt themselves or bang themselves against the wall, I know my kids have done that. Like, you want to intervene and make sure that they're not hurting themselves. But if we are not okay with them crying or letting it out, or we try to tame them in that way, how are we taming ourselves then, right? And some of the ways that we can practice this is, and which is why when people moan, when people scream, when people sing, when people chant, when people, buzz and hum, these are all ways that we activate our vagus nerve. And so our vagus nerve is one of the nerves that run from our head to our, all the way to our toes. And it basically connects the mind and, our gut as well. And when we are able to do those things and express vocally, it calms our nervous system. It's one of the key indications to calm our nervous system, to actually activate our rest and digest, to actually signal the brain that, hey, you're going to be okay. And because we're opening up our throat chakra, in many ways. And one of the biggest things that we can do to also activate that rest and digest is to just breathe. Again, it's that mind-body connection. When we were little, if we wanted to come home after a really hard day and you wanted the embrace of your parents or your caretaker, you wanted that embrace, you wanted that hug, well, you were going to get it. But now, how can you give it to yourself? Well, it's just putting your hand over your heart and just acknowledging, wow, this is big. All right, that sucked. I really bombed on that. Or I'm really furious right now that this didn't go my way. I'm so furious that that person didn't show up, or I needed that person and what the heck, they betrayed me, or whatever the case is, but that we can actually hold ourselves, not need any outside validation or external influences, but we could actually take a moment and just say, okay, yeah, this is big. but to actually acknowledge it and then to voice out, because so much of it is like we start ruminating in our mind and we're like, what the fuck? Like, I can't believe they did this. What the heck? Like, how dare they? What a bitch. What an asshole. I can't believe it. So we're ruminating instead of just sharing, wow, I'm really feeling frustrated right now. I'm really feeling defeated. I'm really feeling hopeless, right? And so to actually voice that and say that and basically transform the energy from feeling it in here or having it up in our mind to just saying it out loud, that in and of itself is a gift. And then what we do with that, right? Some of us want to punch a wall. Okay, that's probably not the healthiest way to do things. Or take it out on somebody else and blame somebody else. I mean, we are all human, and I'm sure, you know, we've probably taken it out on somebody else, maybe verbally or, you know, any of those things, honking at somebody, cutting off somebody while you're driving in traffic, all of those things, right? And so, well, what are some other more positive coping mechanisms? Well, can we actually turn on some music and start stomping or start dancing or start moving, right?
Yes.
Moving that energy.
Yeah.
And because in our society, we've been taught like, oh, we're only supposed to dance when we're at a club, or, you know, we've got to wait until a Thursday night or a Friday night to do that. No, pick your song of choice. Have it as your playlist. This is one of the tools that we can actually utilize. Like, is there a song that you can play when you're feeling like so angry and you're just ready to pounce on somebody, but you can actually regulate your breath 3 times. Maybe you can do some, you know, oming or humming or something to calm your nervous system. There's something that I do with my kids now where it's, you know, we breathe for 3 times and it's great because I'm also reparenting myself too. So like when my kids are acting, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Because it's so much easier to yell at them. It's so much easier to parent them in the ways that we grew up, where it's like, I'll give you something to cry about. Stop right now. Don't you dare. You know, like, I'm going to count up to 3. Like, and I'm not shaming anybody who parents this way. There's no way, like, we are all human and we're all learning at every different point in time. But I think for me, you know, it's an act. It's an act of, okay, I told my son to go to bed 3 times. He's still coming out of his room. And that's where I go, all right, we're going to breathe. I'm going to breathe. You know, we're going to do this together. And it's such a reminder of, all right, where do I need grace? Where do I need compassion with myself? Because sometimes we're also judging our emotion, and instead to just accept it. All right, I'm feeling this way right now. So it's a full reframe. And it's a full perspective shift. And it might take a moment before you respond the next time you do get triggered. Because in taking that moment to respond, in taking a moment to not react, you're taking a moment to process, even if it takes a moment. And that is a baby step. And that's huge. That is huge. And it should be celebrated.
Absolutely. Yes, reparenting ourselves. And the singing and dancing is such a natural thing that humans do. Like little kids, they're doing it all the time. And seeing how many adults are uncomfortable with even going to karaoke.
Yes.
And that used to be me, because I thought I would have to be good. The whole point of karaoke is not to sing good. It's to have fun. You know, self-expression. Same with dance class as well, which I love going to dance class. And I used to be so hard on myself and feel really dumb if I made a mistake or I couldn't remember the choreography. And a lot of people tell me that because they're like, I want to come, but I don't know. I'm like, this is a recreational dance class, right? Like it's not to get everything right. It's to learn and enjoy. So that is my personal growth. Like one of the things I do for personal growth, like, can I enjoy myself in this class? And also just like moving your body. You know, people have different ways of doing it, but the energy needs to come out screaming into a pillow. I love doing that. One of my mentors, I remember the first time I did it, he made me do it over and over. And he was an older Native American man in his 70s. He's like, you know what? I've seen a lot of people, and you have a lot of anger.
That is the best kept secret, by the way. We don't scream into pillows enough. And I feel like I only utilized that tool when I gave birth to my son.
Did you have epidural?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
I would want one.
Yes. No, but I'm saying like screaming into a pillow.
Wait, are you talking about while you're giving birth?
No. But like entering motherhood.
Oh, I see.
Like the chaos
right.
and the craziness and like the emotional regulation needed in motherhood. I think screaming into a pillow is the most underrated tool that we can use to consciously express our anger. That and going to an empty parking lot and screaming on the top of your lungs or in nature.
Yeah. Oh my God, that feels so good.
So good. Oh, so good.
Yeah, everything's just so controlled in like modern society.
Like why?
Why?
Like you know, now it's like you go to some of these retreats and they're like, all right, let's do some primal screaming, and we're judging it, but we're like, okay, actually, there's a place for that.
Absolutely. I think that's what I'm a really judgy person. And I do find myself when I see those things, I'm like, we get it. Okay. But you know what? The truth is, because I need that. I need some of that. I need to do some spiritual work. I'd be a happier person, but then less funny. So I don't.
You can be both.
Can you? I find the times I've done spiritual work, I did notice though, because you're more healed and less judgmental. I'm like, I'm a little less funny, but it's okay.
But I think so here's my take on that. I feel like, you know, yes, there definitely are folks who are very intense with their spiritual work and the work that they're in. But I think, you know, one of the things that I talk about in the book, and that's why I have a title called That Suck Now What? You know, it's not called, like, the third part of my book is called Fly Forward. You know, if I was intense in that work, I'd be like, all right, the book is called Fly Forward. But then I don't think I would be having half of the conversations that we would be having versus having this book called That Suck Now What? It's an invitation. It's like, let's play. Let's invite ourselves to really like laugh at the shit that's gone wrong and the messiness and the chaos in our lives. And I know that many times when I have conversations with people who are not in that space, I'm like, okay, I don't really think we're at that same level, which is totally okay. It's totally fine. But this is a real open call to people, you know, to everyone to give yourself permission to play and to not take yourself so seriously. And that is one of the core pillars of building audacious resilience, is to laugh at yourself, is to actually say, oh shit, that sucked. Well, now what? And not to bypass the things that don't go right, not to bypass the fact that, wow, that heartache and heartbreak was sucked and what you've been through sucked. But there's that second part to it. There's that second part to it when you're ready. And the other thing that I wanted to say when you were talking about karaoke, I was just sharing this with a friend the other day. I'm like, yeah, I think that's probably why most of my Filipino side of the family, like, we would never talk about issues because we would always be singing. And singing drops our, you know, it drops our ability to be tense because we're not in our fight, flight, or freeze, right? We're in our kind of playful, fun, rest and digest. So we're all about just like opening our hearts and diving in, and it's playful. I feel like we need to do more of that. Everyone should get a karaoke machine in their house. We actually got one for Christmas for the kids. Game changer.
Oh, I love it. Oh, they probably love it.
Both of them.
Sing along. I see it on Netflix and stuff. They have a lot of like sing alongs.
Game changer.
Of those movies.
The best.
Oh, I love that. I love nurturing that in kids as well. The self-expression. Self-expression, I think, is so important. That's when I know I'm in a good place, is when I feel self-expressed. And, you know, with kids, when you watch them grow up, naturally they're self-expressed when they're really, really little. And then you start to see as things happen in life, you know, they start to get less expressed. I mean, it's beautiful and like sad at the same time for me that I'm like, you know, like I always hope you remember your spirit. Remember that. And that's what we do as adults. Like, oh, that's right. Like the dancing, singing, the playfulness, and just fun.
It's the fun.
It's fun. Yeah, learning to do that. With dating, I always think, like, some women can be, I've been there before, like really hard on yourselves when like, I really fucked up there. If I didn't do that, I would have been with this guy versus like, oh, I see what I did there. Like you're learning, having that compassion, like, oh, I see what I did there. And now moving forward, I know not to do that instead of like, fuck, I missed my opportunity and gloom, all
Gloom and doom.
gloom and doom.
Gloom and doom. Which never works for anyone.
No, unless you want to be miserable, then do it.
Yeah. But I mean, and that's the other thing that I was going to even share was that's why I love, like, even in our group, we love making fun of each other.
Yes.
We love the joy. We love the funny.
Yes, that's an important part of it. Sometimes people are just like too serious. I'm like, you don't like to laugh? You don't want to?
Oh my gosh. I'm like, all right, you're not my person. Not my person. You gotta be able to bring the jokes in. I think that's a hallmark of somebody that is integrated. And I think the integration is also, it comes with doing some of that self-reflection. Call it self-reflection. Call it building your radical self-awareness. Calling doing the work. I think there's so many different areas of it, but really being able to integrate and align, like, oh, okay, that part of myself, I don't have a trigger about that anymore. Or that person that wronged me, I'm not holding that as a grudge anymore. I'm actually, I wish that person well. That is a hallmark of like, you're so integrated even in that whatever bad thing that has happened that you're willing to then, it's not too soon anymore to make a joke, or it's not too soon anymore for somebody else to bring it up.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking all the things. If people are interested in purchasing this book, where can they do that?
Oh my gosh. Well, that sucked. Now what? And I have a very special 2 gifts for your listeners today. When they go to thatsuckednowwhat.com, they can get the 44-page deep workbook, because I'm all about the healing. I'm all about bringing it to your family. I mean, we're starting to partner up with schools and organizations, and just to give this, like, this is what I wish I had as a tool growing up, going through a lot of the hardship, and giving ourselves permission to actually see what is up and see what is not in alignment and see where it's coming from, and you also get a 5-day fly forward practice that talks about so there's 5 audios, from meditations to healing practices to visualizations and affirmations, so that we can heal from relationships to calling in abundance to taking brave action in our life and to actually coming back home to ourselves. So
awesome. I'm going to gift it to my mom. Okay. Yeah. Okay, if people want to send you a DM on social media, where can I do that?
Oh, yes. I come hang out. I'm at Neeta Bhushan on Instagram.